Ian, welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you today?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really good and I'm very excited to be talking to you. So thank you for inviting me along.
Honestly, I know I've already said this off camera, but I'm so excited to talk to you about disability and food. They're my two favorite topics to talk about. Food,
Oh,
because I love food, and disability because it's my life.
yeah, well, there you go. It's the same for me. It's just they're just two things that have made me probably the happiest I've ever been, despite everything that's changed over the years. But yeah, I mean, disability and food, just the best.
Oh my God, I love it. I'm so excited to talk to you about it because I think you're going to have loads of handy tips and tricks that I never in a million years would have thought of. So that's what I'm really hoping to get out of this conversation.
Well, let's go for it. You pick my brain and it'll all come flooding out. It's fine.
Amazing. So the first question that I like to ask every single guest is, how do you refer to your disability?
So there are two answers to this question, if that's all right. First is if someone asks me that question who doesn't know necessarily what I'm living with, I'll call it a neurophysical disability because
Mhm.
they can see my walking stick, but they can't see the rest. And I
Yeah.
think it just helps them to understand that it's outside and in.
Hmm.
For me, I've got this. You probably think I've gone a bit mad, but it's a rugby ball.
Yeah.
And I used to play loads of rugby when I was younger, and I can't do it now. But the rugby ball to me is my disability because
Hmm.
for a while I used to just hold on to it like this and
Yeah.
just protect it. And then I thought, hang on, no, you're playing rugby here, my friend. Get that ball out. Look, get your head up and have a look what's around you and try and score. So this now has become a symbol of my strength and what I'm going to do with this ball that is my disability. I'm gonna beat everyone and I'm going to score a try. So that's how I look at it.
I honestly could, as someone who spends their life in like the sporting area and sporting field, I could not love that analogy more because I think it's such a sport, particularly when you play it, there's a
Yeah,
particular mindset that comes along with playing sport and a particularly team sport. And now, if you're not a
yeah,
team sports person or sports not really your interest, this like next section is probably not going to interest you. But there is a very particular mentality when it comes to being a sports person. And it's not about how much you can physically do, but it's about your mentality of wanting to win and wanting to play the best game that you can play
yeah,
and working in a team. So I love that the idea that you held on to it, because that's what I would call like a selfish player, someone who holds on to the ball or holds on to
yeah,
like whatever it is that you're doing. But
yeah,
being able to pass it around and spread it is usually when teamwork happens. And that's when you can score or try or whatever, depending on what sport it is. And so I couldn't love that analogy more, that actually your disability now is about passing it around to other people and showing them
yeah,
what can be done and what can be achieved without it being like, I'm doing this because I'm super inspirational. It's
yeah.
I'm doing this because this is going to help someone else.
Absolutely, and it is a team game, and that's exactly what it's all about. And it's one of the things I've learned so much, and it's going to come through time and time again today. I'm sure, you know, I was very selfish with my, I sort of crumpled up, and the outside world didn't necessarily matter as much.
Yeah.
And now it's like, no, hang on, there is a world around you, and they want to share with you, and you want to share with them. So yeah, this ball, and my kids, whenever they see me and I'm a bit low, they'll just grab this and throw it at me and go, Dad, rugby, and I'll go, yeah, good point. So,
Yeah.
and
Oh, I
and then
love
and then
that.
we're off. So yeah,
Oh, I honestly love that so much, because for me that makes sense in my brain and I'm like, yeah, I completely understand that. Like that's a good way of looking at it. So interestingly, I think it's always really interesting to talk to people who, like, I don't want to say develop, but that is the word that I'm going to use,
yeah,
develop their disability through life. Because for
yeah,
you, and now correct me if I'm wrong, but you acquired your disability, you weren't born disabled. And
correct.
so childhood for you would be pretty normal. And like I say
Mm,
normal in like inverted commas, because what is normal anyway? Like
yeah.
normal doesn't really exist. It's this thing that society's made up. But what was it like for you transitioning from being someone who was non-disabled to then suddenly being like, oh, I do have a disability and this is how it's now going to impact my life? What was that like, turning point like for you?
It was very difficult, being to be honest with you. I was in my sort of mid to late 30s, and
Yeah.
I was married, and we just had a daughter, and we were living on another island with my work, and things started to sort of creep slowly worse. So my health was deteriorating, not to the point where you would go, oh gosh, it was just things were chipping away. And then it was after maybe a couple of years that it just dropped, and it dropped like a stone. And at that point, that was really hard to deal with, because there didn't seem to be anyone who could help with everything that was going on.
Yeah.
It was almost like, we can do this bit, or we can do an operation, or we can plug you into this, or we can give you that. But no one was looking at the whole thing. And that was really hard, not just for me, but for my family, because they didn't understand, and I didn't understand what was going on. And all they saw was me getting more and more insular and more sort of frustrated with the world. And so that was really tough to deal with. And that lasted for a number of years. I call them the groundhog years, because they just went around, the same thing was happening over and over again, and I was just not functioning. So it was really tough to deal with a young family, and not just for me, for my wife and the children as well. So that point where it dropped was probably the worst bit. But then the years after, where nothing really seemed to get any better, was really tough. And it was only really when I went to the Bath pain centre for a residential program, that all of a sudden someone was going, right, let's look at this, everything, let's help you understand what's going on here. And that's when suddenly it was like, oh, okay, I've got this, I understand. And that's where this came in, because it was like, right, I need to look forward, not down.
Not down. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is it functional neurological disorder, which is really, really difficult to diagnose, if I'm correct, because it's neurological. And I know a lot of people who have a diagnosis of, was it functional FND? That was like, look at that. My brain had to work then. But because it's so difficult to diagnose, I also know a lot of people who were accused by doctors of faking it, because it can be quite random in how it affects people, and it doesn't affect two people the same. And I was wondering, because the women that, I've just literally just given myself away there, but the people that I've spoken to have all been women who have all been called either mass hysterical or like faking it. And I was just wondering, because you are male, I was wondering, what was that experience like for you? Because obviously women in healthcare, there is a bit of a problem there, but I've never actually spoken to a male who's had functional neurological disorder. And I wondered, like, did you have a similar experience? What was that like?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that about the women and men thing. I am a bit of an oddity. There aren't that many. I mean, I think it's about 10% male to female in this, which doesn't change how it affects you. It's just that seems to be the way it goes. And I think that in one sense made it harder, because people were looking at me going, well, it can't be that, because that's he's a man, that can't be him. But I found the very much exactly as you say, because symptoms would come and then they go, and then I'd have another one, they go, and then I'd have another one, and I'd be in and out of the doctors all the time, and they'd be like, well, you're fine, we've done a brain scan, we've done this, there's nothing wrong with you. And I was like, well, I know there's something wrong. My hand started shaking, my leg doesn't work, and I've just gone to walk somewhere and I've completely frozen solid. That isn't normal. And even when you get eventually referred, and it takes months and months and months and months to get to someone, a neurologist, who does understand these sort of things, there doesn't seem to be a next part which says, here's a program to help you. It's almost like, you've got it, well done, we've diagnosed you, now go live with it. It's like, what? So it's very, I think it's one of those, it just never seems to get to a point where you feel like, okay, I've got this picture now. It never seems to happen. And the more I talk to people who live with FND or any neurological disorders, they seem to have similar sort of stories about, because these things don't just say, you've got a broken leg, let's fix your leg. It's very much we don't really know, and it's a process of elimination almost to get there, and all those tests and things you go through just make things worse. So it's not a particularly pleasant experience, I have to say.
It is. It's such an interesting one, isn't it? Because I always say this, whether you acquire a disability or whether you're born disabled, you don't actually get like a handbook that's like, you're now in the club. Welcome.
Yeah.
Here are some rules and regulations. This might help you. This might not help you. Look at
Yeah.
subsection C. If this is what you've got a diagnosis of, this will really help you out. That doesn't exist.
No.
Like, none of that happens for you. And it is very much a case of adapting to this world around us that isn't built for us, but in a term that's going to work best with you, because as we all know, disability is incredibly individual. You could have the exact same diagnosis on a piece of paper, and how it affects you is worlds and worlds apart. And I always find it super interesting, particularly talking to people who have acquired their disability, that the support that they think they're going to get is never the support that they do get, because it doesn't exist. Like, we haven't quite figured out as a society how to help people who are non-disabled transition to being disabled in a way that makes them feel like they're loved and they're welcomed, and actually like everything's going to be okay. Because it can kind of be like a sentence where it's like, yeah, you've now got this, bye, without actually thinking of the consequences that's going to happen afterwards.
Absolutely. And it's not just the consequences on you, it's on your family, on your friends, everything, because it all gets impacted. And I totally agree with you. I think from, I'm talking 10, 15 years ago, when this all started happening and getting sort of to the point where I could go onto the internet and I couldn't find anyone really that was there that would say, yeah, we can come join us now. There are charities and organizations but they're self-help. They're not set up by the health service or the health, they're set up by people who live with it, which is great. And so having those opportunities now to be able to go and talk to people who've got something similar is wonderful. But there just doesn't seem to be any sort of coordinated approach to it. As you say, and you get I remember when I got my FND diagnosis, I got the letter through with this big long letter about we've done all these scans, blah, 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 blah. Next steps, look up fnd.co.uk, and that was it. Like, okay, wow, thanks very much. So it's like, okay, and that's where it was. And you think, crikey, what and what that does, it almost diminishes your feeling of what you're living with. It makes it feel like it's not important, or not not worthy of having something, and even though that's not the case, but it does impact you a bit negatively when you've gone through all those tests and everything, to suddenly get, here's a website. Wow.
I can completely empathize with that, because I think having to go through like rings and hoops to get diagnosis, or like, and this works out across the spectrum really, regardless of whether it's disability or not. Like, when you've got to jump through hoops and you've got to do tests and turn up for appointments, and then you get this piece of information at the end, and then there's no support. It's like jumping off a cliff without a bungee, because there's no support net, because it doesn't exist.
No,
and people don't know how to approach it.
In a strange way, though, I'm glad it happened like this, because it's made me more determined than ever to create something that will help people. Because if I hadn't gone through that, I think I wouldn't have appreciated as much as I do how soul destroying and independently it can be to not know what I can do or what I can't do. So you automatically think I can't do most things, because that's what you think. But but now I think, having gone through that and understanding how I felt, if you can help other people when they're at that stage, or when they're at the longer stage of knowledge, it's a wonderful thing. But I couldn't have done it if I hadn't gone through all of that in the first place. So yes, it was torture for the family and me, but I wouldn't be doing this now with you if I hadn't gone through that.
See, that's also the thing, isn't it? Is that, yes, we would love to have that support, but I'm also a massive believer in like, hard times make you a better person, which can be quite an unpopular phrase to say, particularly in the disabled community, because that can upset a lot of people. But I stick with my guns. I'm a big believer in like, going through shit makes you stronger. It does. And that's scientifically proven. If you want, I can send you the research. It's a fact.
I agree with you. I think at the time you think this can't be for any good, but actually when you start to be able to look backwards with more fondness than you used to, you realize that actually because of all of that, I'm in a much stronger place because I know where I've come from, and I know what I'm doing now is trying to help people at that stage, which is, it's a joyous thing to be able to do. So, and it is a bit selfish too, because it helps me as well. So, I feel great for helping people. So it's good, it's a win-win.
Yeah, but I think that's the best way to be, really. Like, if you can feel good for helping other people, then like you've done an amazing job. Like, I don't care what you do, like you've made someone else feel good, and in turn that makes you feel good, and that comes back to neuroscience. And again, I can send you the research on it. Like,
Well,
that's just how
it
the
is.
human brain works.
Yeah, I mean, I spent most of my career in financial services, doing lots of hard work for other people, but no one I ever saw getting any reward for it, and it was a job. It was just the thing you went to do, and I thought that was a career. And obviously that all changed. But now I'm able to do. I don't call it a job, because it's just something I love doing. And so yeah, it is. It's all about, I think, about how you look at things, and how how, if you'd asked me this 10 years ago, I'd have given you a very different answer. But that's just the journey you go. I hate the journey word, but it's just that pathway you go on. So yeah.
Honestly, this is the most seamless transition ever, because I'm about to ask you, oh my God, honestly, like, pat myself on the back, and actually you, because we've kind of merged this in together. It's actually so good. So the next thing that I like to go on to talk about is, how has your disability impacted your career, and how has it gone on to do what you do now?
Well, my career basically stopped. I'd worked in financial services all around the world, and I grew up in the Isle of Man, so it's either financial services or farming, and I went to financial services. And then that was sort of my life. It's how I met my wife. It's how, it's got so many good things about it, but in the end, it did contribute to my not being well. But after, I had to give up work, but because I just couldn't do it anymore with all the therapy and things. And then it was, someone asked me a big question, what is it you want? And I said, what? He said, what do you want? And I said, well, I just want to be more visible to my family. I want to be a bit upright, and I want to be available for them, because I've missed so many things. And cooking was my thought process, because I'd always loved it, but not really to the point of, oh, this is marvelous, but I just enjoyed cooking. My mum was a wonderful cook, and it just was in me. And I thought, well, let's try this, shall we, and see what happens. And it was probably the biggest disaster you could ever known to man. I mean, everything went wrong, and nothing worked, because my brain wasn't working the same, and my body wasn't working how it used to work. So I'd open a cookbook, and I just couldn't understand it. It wasn't computing. I'd get halfway through it and realize I should have turned the oven on a half an hour ago. And those things, when you're living with these, they just completely throw you off the edge. So it's, I can't do this. I can't just open the fridge and look and go, oh, let's make that. It just wasn't there. So my wife said to me, well, are there ways that you think you could cook? And I said, well, nothing really seems to be set up in the kitchen. It's just full of, it's full of sort of sharp, hot, pointy, heavy things, which aren't really great for people when you've got limb weakness or brain conditions, etc., because it's set up to be dangerous. And not many people can afford to have a really wonderful kitchen that's all sort of set up. So it's like, well, there's just so many things, and it starts before you even get in the kitchen. You start to catastrophize everything about, oh no, it's going to go horribly wrong, I'm going to burn it, it's going to be a disaster. And it was like, well, why don't you write a cookbook then? I was like, yeah, right, okay. And he said, no, write one. And I said, all right. so I had loads of sort of recipes and things that I'd done in the past, but I'd never really written them down. So I started writing them down, and when I wrote them down, I realized that they didn't look anything like a cookbook that I have. They were written in a way that was structured very differently, and it was like, because that's how I wanted to see it. And I thought, well, actually, this is quite different. And I felt so happy when I was first able to cook something, and it was nothing much. It was just something, and my family were like, "Yay! Look what you've done!" And it was like, I don't know, that's amazing. And that flood of joyous sort of feelings, like, wow, maybe if it helps me, maybe it might help someone else. So I took the book and I self-published it in the end because I couldn't find anyone who was sort of interested in it. You know, I'm not a celebrity chef,
Yeah.
but I self-published the book Cookfulness, and it came out, and I thought, well, that's the end of that then. And then all of a sudden, I was in BBC Good Food magazine in their Making a Difference section. It was like, wow, what?
Yeah.
And it just kept going, and it was just people asking to talk about the book and why was the book. And then it's like, yeah, I love talking about the book, but what am I going to do with this now? And it was a thing called Footsteps Festival, who do an online sort of presence for people living with chronic pain. They said, will you do like a little cooking program for us? And I was well, okay. So I turned the book into something visible and real, and it was awful to start with. I was terrible. It was really, really bad because I didn't, you know, I was very shy, very nervous. I didn't know what to do. But actually then people started saying, this is really helpful, thanks very much. And I thought, oh, okay, let's see if anyone else wants this. And it just grew from there, that now the book sort of was the platform to now be doing cooking demonstrations and programs for charities and hospitals. And you know, last week I was doing one to the FND Hope community in America, Canada, and the UK, all online. And it's just like, this is mad. But it's all about, it's not just the cooking bit, it's the whole bit around it, the pre, the during, and the after, about how you can mentally prepare yourself, how you, as well as smart equipment that you can get, smart ingredients, how you can use things. So you said it right at the beginning, every day is different. So what I can cook today, I probably can't do tomorrow. And how can you, is there a way to do that? And I've developed all these ways that hopefully will allow you to cook every single day, but how I cook it today could be very different to how I do it tomorrow. But that's all great, and that's brilliant. And there's no shame in using things like frozen ingredients or tubes and paste and whatever. They're there for a very good reason, and they help you. So if they help you, use them. and so now this whole thing of teaching people how to, not just how to cook, because people know a lot of people know how to cook. They just don't know if they can cook, or they don't feel safe. And so it's just providing that whole program of thoughts about of packaged approach to say, there's not one answer to this, there's quite a few. And if I can share that with you and you can go away and actually say, I've just made something, it's just, it's the best thing ever. So yeah, I'm now, from being financial services, I'm now a cook who's sharing hints and tips and cooking programs and things for anyone who wants to listen. So yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And I think what's so important about what you do, and we hear about it all the time, is how important cooking and food is for us. And like, I am absolutely someone who is highly affected by what they eat, like highly, highly affected. I know if I don't have enough vegetables, or if I don't have like my correct diet, I will be an asshole. Like that's just like a fact. Like I'm not very good if I don't eat, like get really cranky. I'm also not very good if I have too much like processed quick food, like that's really bad for me. And I think particularly with disabled people and as a community and as a group of people, food is actually so, so important because our bodies don't work the same. Sometimes our minds aren't wired the same. And food is that, it's that thing that brings everybody together, isn't it? And so when you don't feel like you can take part in something that is so vital for our human existence, and you as a person, you're giving that space to people to be able to be like, actually, you can do this. And do you know what, like it's going to look a bit different, might taste a bit different, but it's all going to work the same. Isn't that like one of the best things that you can do? Because you're making it accessible for everyone.
Yeah, it's just the most amazing thing. And if I'm doing a program and then the next week they're on and someone says, I had this the other week, someone said to me, I actually cooked a meal. It was not the most, it wasn't a difficult thing, but for her it was. And she made this thing and she said, and I actually sat at the dining table for the first time in 4 years and ate it. And I was just like, that's just, it's just hugely rewarding. And when you said at the beginning, one of the first things I try and help people with is that cooking can be just functional. It can just be something that you have to do, and therefore you're not going to enjoy it. And it could be that you just, as you say, you have to create X, Y, Z vegetables or whatever to allow you to live.
Yeah.
So what I say to people is that that's absolutely fine, but what we need to do is come back a step and say, if I can make cooking a really key part of your day, so not the bit you squeeze into all the other things that you're trying to do,
Yeah.
because cooking when you're disabled or chronic illness is just as hard as anything else is. So why do you squish it into the other things that are your sort of, I need to do these things today? Make it one of those things, because then it becomes more of a, yeah, look what I've achieved. And actually, I'm giving it the time that it needs, as opposed to the squish it in and then everything gets on top of you and you get really angry with it. Whereas if you make it something that's really important of your everyday and celebrate the hell out of it because you've made something, it starts to change how you see cooking, because it's.
But I love that, because it's an approach to cooking that we might not necessarily have heard of before. Because, you know, like I very much grew up in a generation where like Jamie Oliver was on the TV and it was all about like banging things in a pot as quickly as you can to get the like best meal for your time type thing, you know. And actually, there's something really beautiful in taking time out to eat and to cook, because actually they sustain life. Like it does. You know, unless you are fed through like a peg, then, you know, food is a very, very vital part of your day. And you're right. Why should we squeeze something that is vital for us into like 15 minutes when actually we need to be thinking like more long term, more longevity, that actually it's about creating a space that makes you feel comfortable enough to be in it, because actually cooking can be quite inaccessible, but be like giving you a sense of pride at the end of it, because actually you've made this for yourself. And it's like, I hate to say this because it is quite cringe, but it is an act of self-love. Like you're giving yourself that time, that space, that nourishment to support yourself to carry on. And I think, oh, I love this. Oh, I feel so like warm and fuzzy.
I mean, that's what I want people to feel about cooking, because even making a piece of toast is cooking, and that's really hard, you know, to actually do that. So every little thing you do, celebrate the hell out of it, and make sure everyone around you shares that with you, because to understand how difficult that is for you to have done it, if we can start to sort of chip away at the layers of insecurity and catastrophizing that go on, because I did them myself for many, many years, and I still do them every single day. But actually, the more you feel that it was an experience that you loved, then the more you're going to want to do it even more. And I sort of say, I don't think you can jump straight into nutritional cooking, because if you don't want to cook, you're never going to cook nutritionally, because it's something that you go, well, hang on, it's all got weird things in it. So if we can create a space where you feel that cooking is the most wonderful thing, you're more likely to then move towards eating a little bit more nutritionally, trying something a little bit different. I don't think you can jump straight to that, because you're just going to get turned straight off. So I'm almost sort of the pre-cooking and cookbooks were sort of wonderful things. But I'll give you an example of, you know, in a cookbook you have the preparation time and the cooking time, and everyone has them. But the preparation time only works if you're in the same sort of health as the person who wrote the book, because I can't. Why would I be able to do it at the same speed someone who does it who doesn't have what I have? So immediately when I'm trying to do it in 15 minutes, I'm thinking, why am I not doing it as fast as they? Why is it not working? Why am I not able to do it? And everything's going, no, 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 no. So just by adding an extra one, so I've the give yourself time. So I've got prep time, cook time, give yourself time. Give yourself time is like a buffer of time that you can add on anywhere you want, but you've planned it from the beginning that you might take this long, not this long. So it just takes away a bit of that sort of pressure. And it's the things like that that I've sort of added to the structures of recipes and how I share people, to say, if you give yourself time, it means that today I might be able to do it in 20 minutes, tomorrow it might take half an hour, but both of them are good. That's the sort of where we're going with it.
But I love that as well, because I think you're right. Cookbooks, they're incredible things. It's beautiful that we have these things that we can pass down, recipes and traditions, and, you know, and share culturally. But actually, you're right that we do put like a little amount of pressure on ourselves for it to be the exact what's written on the paper. And if it's not, it is immediately like, oh, I failed, or it's catastrophe, it's not going well, or alternatively, what's wrong with me and why am I not doing it right?
And take the pictures. You get the glossy pictures of a dish. So in my book, I took the decision to put no pictures in it, which
Mhm.
people were going, you can't do that. Pictures sell books. And I know they do. But what I found was, with my own experiences, was when I opened this thing and looked at this wonderful dish, I'd either say, I can't make that, or I'd try it and it looked nothing like it. And then I'd
Yeah.
be, no matter how it tasted, I'd still feel like I hadn't really done it very well. So I
Mhm.
took the pictures out because I want people to feel that whatever you make, it's right. So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. If I can have ingredients, you could have exactly the same ingredients, and what we produce will look differently. But it doesn't matter because whatever you make, it's right. Whatever I make, it's right. So again, it's just saying you don't have to feel that it needs to look like something or whatever. I mean, I share some of my absolute disasters. They're hilarious, some of them. I tried making vegan Yorkshire pudding and it came out like a crispy pancake. But it's okay because that's fine. Years ago, that would have tipped me over the edge, but it doesn't matter now. It's actually the process of getting to it that I want people to celebrate, not the
Yeah.
last minute where it looks awful or you think, because that destroys all that wonderfulness that you've had before. So
Mhm.
it's about recognizing that you've taken an hour to make this wonderful thing. The fact that it didn't turn out quite right at the end doesn't matter. Just remember all the great part that you had making it, not the last minute of thinking it's burned to a crisp, because that's just the last bit. It's not all the bit before it.
Yeah. And I know I keep saying it, but I feel like that's such a good way to look at life as well,
Yeah,
because we're all kind of given the same shit. I mean, like, we're given life, right? And it tends to be pretty similar for everyone. We are kind of like our eyes all open and we wake up and we're like, oh my God, we're here. But what you like, in terms of life and ingredients, like what you get and what I get could be similar, but what we do with them is going to be completely different. And that
yeah,
also applies to disability,
yeah,
particularly when you look at the restraints around how we navigate the world and the adaptations that we have to make. So like our lives are going to be very different from those who are non-disabled because they don't have to think about adapting. That's not there for them. But
yeah,
I love that the pictures aren't included because I think that also means that everything you do is right
yeah,
regardless. There's
yeah,
no restrictions, where I think, for being disabled people, their restrictions are everywhere. We're told what we can do, what we can't do, particularly
yeah,
by medical professionals who seem to love to be like, oh, you shouldn't do this. Or, for example, physiotherapists who told me how to hold a yogurt pot that was going to be in my best interest. Definitely wasn't in my best interest. I can hold a yogurt pot how I want to, but
yeah,
we, not having that picture to be like, oh, I'm comparing myself. It's that comparison, isn't it? Comparing myself to this and it doesn't look like this, so therefore it's wrong. Well, if the picture doesn't exist, whatever you do is right.
yeah, absolutely. And it gives you a freedom that says
Yeah.
right from the beginning to the end, I feel free. I feel like it doesn't matter how this goes. And that's really what I do with the tools that I'll give people, is that
Mhm.
I've got this sort of 12 steps to the happy stuff, which is basically 12 sort of topics that you may need three of them one day, you may need eight one the next day, but it's just a little kit that you've got that says, I need today, if I'm going to cook, I'm going to need these bits. But it gives you the freedom to do that and it flexes with you. So
Yeah.
you don't think, this is for me and it makes me feel a bit like, oh God, he's doing this specially because I'm disabled. It's not. It's about giving you all of the options that you need.
Mhm.
And I think having that flexible kit for cooking is exactly what you say. If you have that same approach to life, because today I can't necessarily go out to a walk. If yesterday I might have gone for a long walk, but actually, if you apply that sort of approach of there are ways and means that I can do things each day to achieve, but not necessarily, it doesn't have to be what I did yesterday, and it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be what I'm doing tomorrow. But what I'm doing today is the best that I can for how I am today,
Yeah.
and that freedom of saying that thing, whatever I'm doing, it's right. It's a wonderful thing, and it's hard because it's not natural to
Yeah.
feel that, and
Yeah.
you have to work at it, and that's why chipping away at these little elements to say, actually, now that's okay. Now that bit's okay, and you suddenly feel like a wow. And I got that sense when I first made something end to end. It was like, what the hell just happened? Nothing actually stopped me from doing it. So
Uh-huh.
it's just like, wow. And that whole approach has definitely mirrored into my life as well. And also my family, they know that what I can do one day might not be how it goes to the next day, but they understand the sort of variables as well. So we work with that on a wider scale. So yeah, it does work a lot in wider life too.
Do you know what I love the most about this? Is I like to think that I'm a bit of a rebel. I mean, the reality is I'm probably not. But I really like the idea that this is taking like the traditional stance of cooking and almost being like, fuck off. This is how we're going to do it. And actually,
Yeah,
fuck your rules. They
yeah,
don't work. And I
yeah.
love that so
It is.
much.
It's wonderful to be a little bit like rebellious, because
Yeah.
it's like, you know what you're saying doesn't work for me.
Uh-huh.
So why do I keep banging my head against the wall trying to do it when I know it's not going to work? So why don't we just rip it all up and start again? And that's really what happened. It was from all my head banging against the wall. It was when my wife said to me, "Well, tear it up. If it doesn't work, don't do it. Let's try something else." And it's like, oh yeah. And actually being able to tear those rules up and actually say, I'm not going to follow the way you do it, but I'm going to still be able to make something that's fantastic. And you might not be able to follow how I do it, but that's fine, you know. But I think it is a bit rebellious, and it's wonderful. It's because you start to feel a bit like excited about food as well. You feel a bit like,
Yeah.
whoa, what can I do with this? And I say to people as well, try something new. You get very sort of stuck in making the same things over and over again. So just once every few weeks, just buy something a bit weird, something a bit strange. Go down the world food aisle and say, what the heck is that? And just get it. And it's hard because times are difficult, but just get something and go, right, I'm going to take that home and say, what do I do? Because it just, again, fires the creative juices. The rebellious side of you becomes a bit more fun. Even if you buy like the spiciest kimchi and think, what the heck am I going to do with that? Add it to some beans, some baked beans, and all of a sudden you've got a completely new dish. That's
Yeah.
cooking. That's exciting. And if it doesn't taste very nice, that's all right. It doesn't matter. What's the worst thing that's happened? You just give it to the kids. It's like, but it's just about firing, continuously trying to fire the imagination and your creativity, because I found that very sank inside me very deeply when I was first sort of struggling with illness.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to bring that out in a way that it's art, as far as I'm concerned. It's a
Yeah.
creative art, and it's just wonderful to be able to say, right, today I'm going to break the rules completely. I'm going to put that in this. Well, who says those rules were right? Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. Constantly saying to people who are on my programs, try something different. If you don't like this ingredient, put what you like in it. It's not
Yeah.
my recipe, it's yours. So you do what you want with it. And if it works brilliantly, tell me, because I think that's fantastic. So, it's food just should be whatever you feel. And I love
Yeah.
that. But when you feel shit, you don't cook. So if we can develop the feeling of happiness and pride
Mm-hmm.
and joy, you're going to be more creative. So yeah, and the rebellious side comes out, which is great.
I honestly love that so much. I think it's such a great way to be like, I'm going to do it how I want to do it. And it doesn't matter what your rules are, but it's going to work for me. And it doesn't look like how everybody else does it, but that's fine because it works for
Yeah,
me. And it's why we're here, isn't it? Like, and I mean,
yeah,
like, in the wider sense of like why we're on this planet, which by
yeah.
the way is a floating rock. So everything isn't really real anyway. Like,
And then don't hide it.
yeah.
Tell everyone, look what I've done. I've just made the first Yorkshire pudding with kimchi. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. I tried once to make a dish, and it was supposed to be savory and it came out sweet, but I created this dish that was the weirdest thing. But now it's like, actually, I don't know if I can do that again, but it was actually quite nice. And
Yeah.
and that's the one. And things like, uh, when you're in the kitchen, I feel that everything's going in at you saying you need to be quick, you need to do this, fast, pressure, pressure, pressure. So take that away. So I do a lot of my preparation at the kitchen table,
Mm-hmm.
because I can sit down, I'll feel more relaxed. I'll put the music on, and I feel like there's less pressure on me. Why do you have to be in the kitchen to cook? Yes, you might have to be there to heat things and put it in the oven, but you can do your preparation anywhere. Those old tea tray on your lap. Why not? Who's to say that that's wrong? Who's to say that that's not the way to go? If it works for you, do it. And that's what
Yeah.
I think is wonderful, is that there are so many answers out there, but people just don't feel they're able to try them.
Yeah.
So if we can unlock that sort of feeling of, let's give it a crack, and then it's amazing what happens. People will try things and do different things. It could be ingredients, it could be utensils, it could be equipment, it could be where you are, it could be anything. But
Yeah.
those rules, if you feel that they're breakable, then you're off. So
Yeah. Oh, like it's just It makes me so happy. Food just makes me so happy. Like, I could talk about it forever. But what I'd like to ask you is, like, upon reflection and looking at everything that you've been through, do you have a piece of advice for your younger self who didn't necessarily know what was going to happen?
Yeah, definitely. It's get out of your lane. I was in a sort of in my lane of I work, I live, and I played golf, and that was it. And I didn't see much what was going on around.
Yeah.
And not it wasn't a particularly narrow lane, but it was a lane. It's a bit like when you go 10-pin bowling and they put the barriers up at the sides, so
Yeah.
everything was going ding 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 ding, and nothing was going outside of it. And it was only when that by becoming ill that I started to look that way and see that there was a much bigger world out there of people and things that were happening. So when I was, if I'm looking back at my younger self, is you've got to look wider. The job you do is not the most important thing. Yes, it's important for your living, but around you is your family. Wider than that is friends. Wider than that is travel. Wider than that is people who are in unfortunate situations. Wider than that, there's and that whole, it can be a bit like, whoa, it's too big. But if I look back and say, just start to edge out a bit wider, try something different, just try to do something a little bit more. Take the kids to go bowling or something, and I don't mean 10-pin bowling, I mean crown bowling. It's something
Yeah.
nuts, but get out of that routine of that lane that I was in. And because of what happened to me, I blew that lane apart.
Yeah.
It would have, if that lane had been stretched a little bit, then, who knows what could have happened. But I think that whole narrow sort of tunnel that I was in, that I thought was a great life, it wasn't.
Yeah.
So it was great, it was wonderful, but it's not anywhere near how I feel now. And I was in a job that was quite well paid, and it was really, and that seemed to be like, yay, I'm doing really
Yeah.
well. But I look back and I wasn't doing really well, not from mentally, not physically, and not from a family perspective. I was very sort of, so just to broaden that a bit, I think would be huge advice for me going back.
But I also think that's such an important thing to say, because consistently, and maybe it's a generational thing, I don't know, but I know that a lot of people have always been like, stay in your lane. And actually it's when you leave your lane, you learn a bit more,
Yeah.
and you actually learn what you do and you don't like a bit more. Whereas if you're consistently staying in your lane the whole time, everything's the same.
Yeah.
Same
I'll give you,
people, same
and
place.
you're sporting, and you'll know this. So I love sports, and I always loved them, and so not being able to play them as much is quite hard. But I used to be watch the football on a Sunday, the men's football, watch the Olympics, loved all that.
Yeah.
But once I started watching the Paralympics and appreciating how incredibly amazing sports people these were, and it was like, wow, this is really interesting. And then I saw sports and I saw things differently. With the women's football, I've been following women's football for years and years. It's not, it's wonderful how it is now, but I was watching it when it was, 10 people and a dog
Yeah.
watching. And I love it. And now and that's what I mean by getting out of your lane a bit is I would play golf on a Saturday, and I'd watch the men's football on Sunday. It's actually, there are so many other people that you could be watching and enjoying and supporting. And disability sport, I think, is just the best thing ever. I love watching it because of how great and the competition is, but also the camaraderie is wonderful. And it's still, it's full on brutal sports. But
Yeah.
but then with things like women's football, women's rugby, it's just how sport, to me, how it should be. And I love watching that. And now I probably watch much more women's sport than I do men's sport because I just enjoy it more.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, just pushing those boundaries out a little bit and just appreciating that there are a lot more things than the bit that you watch. And just seeing that and appreciating it more, and seeing how far people have come. When the women won the Euros last year, it was only 10 years before that none of them were professional, or none of them, they were all working 3 or 4 jobs to try and get through. And it's like, wow, these guys have really worked hard to get where they are, and they're not paid anywhere near what other people are paid. But look at how brilliant it is. And that's made me want to support more sort of
Yeah.
things like that. Things like, I follow all kinds of people on the internet now, and watch stuff because I just love hearing about what they do and how they do it. Whereas before I wouldn't have got anywhere near that.
Yeah. And it's about like making your perspective as wide as possible within, to the point where you're not going to be overwhelmed, isn't it? Because I
Yeah,
think what you said is so key, is that actually if you do suddenly like look out, all of a sudden, like, you know, you do have your lanes up, and then if you went to just get rid of them completely and look at everything, I think you'd be like, oh
yeah,
my God, the world is freaking
so
massive.
true.
And it would be overwhelming. But you're right. If
Yeah,
you do just slowly start to stretch your lane, or like, you know, take an interest in something you've never taken an interest in before, you're right. The world becomes a much more colorful place, I think, because we're all like, staying in your lane is great if, you know, you're career driven and that's what you want to do. That is
yeah,
amazing. But there is also life outside of that.
yeah,
Equally, I'm very aware that the privilege that I have in saying that I can say that, because sometimes it's not necessarily the option. But if you can even just look a little bit outside your own scope, then I think
yeah.
you'll learn something new. And
You
that's what we're
do.
here for. I like to think that, and we've actually touched on this topic, that through any form of hardship or hard time, you grow. And if you can look back at that time and noticed a particular positive trait about yourself, then in some ways it has been worth it. And I was wondering, is there a particular positive trait that you've noticed about yourself that actually, upon reflection, you're really proud of?
The one massive thing is this desire to help.
Hmm.
I thought that's what I had for many years. It was like, I'm helping people by through my work. I'm giving, their providing a support network for their money to grow a little bit. And it's actually, no, it's not that. And I think now this joyous feeling of one, not helping people, wanting to help people, because
Hmm.
none of what I do is has any financial sort of thing to it. It's all about, I know what I went through, and I know what I'm still going through, and I know what my family go through. So if I can help someone with that,
Yeah.
it's the best feeling ever, and it's more reward than anything I could ever have. And that trait that, I had quite a selfish nature,
Hmm.
and I look back and realize that I was quite selfish quite a lot of the time. So to be able to squish that down a bit and become a bit more aware of what's happening and start to help people is a huge change. But it's something that is just the most wonderful thing. I love it, and I love the fact that I could be talking to one day people with F&D, the next day I'm talking to people with long COVID, the next day I've got Muscular Dystrophy Society, and everyone is interested in food. And it's not necessarily about, I live with this, I live with that, I live with this. It's like, well, let's find a way to help you to enjoy food. And that is
Yeah.
just that feeling of bringing people together over a common, rather than dealing with everyone in their own lanes, is just like saying, well, we all need a bit of food. And even if, you talked earlier about, people who are tube fed. I've got a little secret thing going on at the moment where I'm working with someone about hopefully doing something for the tube fed community to help
Uh-huh.
them as well. So there shouldn't be anything off limits, and that's what that trait in me now, that sort of selfishness, has gone to openness of saying, well, let's try helping everyone. And
Yeah.
if people say no, it's not going to work, that's fine. I don't
Yeah.
mind, but I'd rather ask and try than not try at all. And that's a big change in my personality.
I love that, because I'm a big believer in, there's no such thing as failure. It's just a feedback mechanism.
Mm,
And I think if you can like instill that in your own brain, I think that makes it actually makes life a lot easier, because you, like, there is no winning and losing. It's literally winning or learning.
yeah,
And I love that, because you're right. Food is the one thing that brings us all together, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, what language we speak. It doesn't matter. We all need to eat, and everybody, or vast majority of people I know, do enjoy eating.
mm,
And it's something that
yeah,
we can all do together. And I think that that's so great, rather than being like, you know, this is your disability, so this is what you can do. This is your disabilities, this is what you can do, which is quite often what we get told anyway. Actually, just completely bulldozing that and being like, well, let's see what we can do today, all together, all of us. There are no rules here. Have a go,
yeah.
is like amazing. Right. So, what are your top three tips for kitchen and cooking?
So number one is widen your kitchen. And what I mean by not knock the walls down, I mean try and not think about the kitchen it's as the only place where you cook. Use whatever you've got around you. Use the table, anywhere that you feel more comfortable. So widen the kitchen. Use your freezer is the next one I say a lot, because in my freezer, a lot of vegetables are like lethal objects. You try and you take an onion, you try and peel and chop an onion. It's like this could
It's a
go horribly wrong.
disaster.
Things could. How many of my fingers are going to end up in the? I don't know. So, and they're really hard work. So I always have a bag of frozen, ready chopped onion that I've bought from the supermarket and you can get the white ones and the red ones. Just how many dishes start with onion? So knowing that I'm not going to be able to chop that onion, I don't want that to stop me making the dish. So if I can get in my freezer and know I've got a bag of ready-made, it's ready chopped, is that cheating? Hell no. It's really clever. It's really smart because I don't know. I can't chop an onion every day, so I want to still make that dish. And also, you're not wasting because you're only using what you need. So it's got a joy to it, and that extends. That whole use of the freezer extends to pre-chopped veg of any sort, because veg can be really hard to prepare. Just take a stir fry. Stir fries are full of wonderful veg, but crikey, if you're not working very well, your hands or your mind, it's hard work to try and prepare one. So if you get a bag of ready stir fry vegetable mix, you've jumped ahead of that barrier that was saying, I can't do this. So that's not cheating. That's really clever. So use it and use your energy towards cooking it and maybe a sauce rather than all the sort of the hour of trying to chop all the veg. So the freezer, I think, is a wonderful thing. And also that the probably the last big tip I would give is to do a little extra cooking. So I mentioned it earlier. I used to be a batch cooker when I was well, and now batch cooking fills me with horror because it's like I see loads of Tupperware going off into the distance and pots of chili are bubbling away.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here we go, another one. And now I can't do that. And if you can batch cook, I think it's wonderful. It's a great thing to be able to do, but I can't do it. I haven't got the strength to be able to do batch cooking. So I do a little extra cooking. So if I'm making a bolognese, which I think I'll talk about bolognese in a second, but if I'm making a bolognese, I'll make a little extra than I need. So I'll maybe make 2 portions more than I need because I can still manage that. And then I'll put those extra bits in the freezer. And that's done. And then I don't know when I'm going to need that, but there's going to come a day when I know I can't cook very well. So if I get something out that I've already made, it could be almost done. All I need to do is defrost it, warm it up. You're still cooking, and you should still be really proud of yourself because not only did you make that, but you made it knowing you were going to need it. How clever is that? That's brilliant. So I think that whole process of being able to help yourself when you don't planning for the planned and planning for the unplanned. So if you can plan for the unplanned, then this is brilliant. And you feel so good about yourself because I feel awful. I can't cook today, but look what I've made. It's like, isn't this clever?
I just think it all ties so nicely together. And I think what an amazing thing to be able to do is to be able to pass through that knowledge that you've got about cooking and all these tips and tricks. And for anybody who's listening to this, I really, really recommend going onto Ian's website and checking it out because there is a whole 12 steps of making your kitchen an amazing place to be and hints and tips and tricks and everything. And I just think nobody actually teaches you these things when you become disabled or you are disabled. For me, chopping an onion is a freaking nightmare. I don't have a hand to hold it. It can slip, it can slide. The amount of times I have cut myself with a sharp knife cutting an onion is I can count it more times than the fingers that I have on the one hand that I do have. And so to be able to be actually no, you don't have to do that. You can buy ready-made or if you have the time and have someone who's in your house who can cut an onion, get them to do it and then freeze it.
Freeze it.
There are so many options, and I love that because like I said, nobody gives you these tips and tricks and you have to look them out, and what you're doing is providing that service, and I think that's amazing. I honestly have loved this conversation so much because I think other than talking about cooking, we've actually covered so much more than that. We've spoken about mindset, we've spoken about like how to approach life, how to approach cooking, how like, and they all kind of intermingle, and it's like a recipe in itself, making a
It
dish at
is.
the end of it, isn't it? And like,
Yeah.
I honestly have loved this conversation so much. I'm so thankful that you've come on this podcast, because I think this has just been such an insightful episode, and just thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've absolutely
Oh
loved it.
no, honestly, it's just a joy talking to you, because it's just, sharing things and talking and listening. And as an offer to you, if you ever want me to come back, we'll make something on one, so we can cook something together if you like.
Oh my God, I am obsessed. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we can take everything I've talked about and actually turn it into reality. So maybe if you ever want to, we'll do it.
Oh my
A
God, guys, I'm
Cookfulness
so
cook along.
excited. Oh my gosh. I love food.
So tell you what, you can decide what we want to make, and we'll make it. Anything that you don't like or you find really difficult to make or is a real struggle, you tell me what it is and we'll do one.
I love this. Oh my goodness, guys. You heard it here first. Disabled and Proud cook along. I cannot wait. Ian,
So
it's been
thank you.
amazing having you on today. I've really enjoyed it, and I can't wait for the cook along.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy, honestly.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.